It's fun being a birdie. Now here's a neat find. Woodpecker has been at work. When it's your passion, you just love doing it. It's a very easy thing to get involved with.
Thank you so much for watching Anoka County today. I'm Martha Weaver, and we are here at the gorgeous Wargo Nature Center with Bob Holtz, who is one of our adult education specialists and also an ornithologist, which means that he is a bird expert. So one of the things that we want to talk to you about in this segment of Birding with Bob is talking about the birds of our lakes and wetlands. And of course, Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes, but we know there's a lot more and probably as many wetlands. So we've got a lot of birds to talk about. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, what I like about the birds in our wetlands is that many of them are rather large.
Yeah.
And that makes it really neat for showing them to young children.
Okay.
Plus, they're not nearly as active as our little songbirds. So if you get a kid looking at a bird in the wetlands, chances are pretty good that he's going to get a nice long look at it too.
Okay.
So that makes it much easier for them then to identify things.
Okay. First one that kind of comes to mind is the common loon, which is really a very good sized bird. It's a big bird.
It's a big bird, is right, yeah. It's been our state bird since 1961. For a couple reasons. Probably one, it's a unique bird, one of a kind type of thing. The bird was selected for that, plus the fact that of all the 48 states, lower 48, no state has as many loons as we do. We have about 12,000 loons nesting in Minnesota
I'm going to get this other
year.
state bird, your mosquito, off
Mosquito, okay.
the unofficial state bird.
So if people are out fishing, and if you're north of the Twin Cities, most likely you're going to see some loons, you know that they're fishing also.
Right.
Because a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 young, will eat about a ton of fish in one summer.
A ton?
A ton, 2,000 pounds, yeah. They put away a lot of fish.
What kind of, do you happen to know offhand what kind of fish they prefer? I mean, are they bluegill, are they crappie eaters, or perch?
Pretty much grab things that are small enough to swallow. So they have to have pretty tiny ones for the young, and as they get bigger, they eat bigger things too.
Okay.
And, yeah. So.
Okay.
And the as far as wintering, they go down to the Gulf of Mexico or to the East Coast. And to take off and fly, though, is tough for a loon because they don't have the hollow bones that most birds do.
Really?
They have a solid bone structure.
Okay.
So it really takes an effort for them to get airborne. And you may have seen them run across the water quite some distance, pounding the water with their wings.
Reminds me of that old airplane. They barely got off the ground.
And once they get up, though, they can go up to 75 miles an hour.
Really?
So once they get going, they move quite well.
Is that why you don't necessarily see a loon? You just don't see them flying very much. You see them more in the water, in their habitat.
It's pretty much true of most birds that you don't see them flying around except when they're migrating. Or if you're looking at smaller birds, then that becomes truer that they're moving around a lot. They're more active.
Okay. All right. How about other big birds?
Well, I guess we go with big birds, we'd go with swans.
Okay.
We have 2 kinds of swans mainly that pass through. There's a third kind that's minor, shows up occasionally, so I'll just talk about the 2. And the tundra swans go up to the tundra, as it implies, to nest, whereas the trumpeter swans will nest in our area here.
Oh, okay.
There was a time when there were lots of swans in the metro area. I should have said in Minnesota.
Okay.
But by 1880, because they had been overhunted for feathers, skin, and mainly meat, they were out of Minnesota. No more left.
Okay.
And by 1930s, there were only about 69 left in the wild.
Wow.
Period. There were only 69 left.
Of the
They were all
trumpeters.
of the trumpeter swans. They were all in Montana. They slowly recovered, and by the 1960s, 40 were brought to the Hennepin Park Preserve.
Okay.
And they've slowly multiplied here, and we now have a couple thousand
From that to 40.
swans nesting in Minnesota.
Okay.
They nest here in the metropolitan area.
Okay.
They lay 5 to 7 eggs.
Okay.
And are pretty successful with raising them.
Okay.
Just 2 summers ago, there was a family of 5 in Shoreview.
Really?
Yeah. And in terms of big, they have a wingspan of at least 7 feet. I can't
Of
even
at
stretch
least
mine.
7 feet?
At least 7 feet, yeah.
It's huge.
That's huge, yeah. It's our biggest bird in Minnesota. You can't find anything bigger than that.
Huh,
Yep.
that is a very large bird. Okay. How about the herons? Everybody's familiar with the herons because you'll see them along the lake shore, walking so slowly, and they're still like a statue, or you see them flying and those long legs sticking out behind them.
Right, and that's because of that they're pretty hard, I should say, to miss.
Yeah.
You know, they stand about 4 feet tall. They eat pretty much anything they want. Fish is kind of high on the list.
Right.
But I've seen a great blue heron catch and swallow whole a 12 to 14-inch northern.
Wow.
I've seen them stab and swallow whole a gopher, our 13-line ground squirrel. And they swallow them whole because great blue herons, like other birds, don't have teeth. So they pretty much have to. If you look at a great blue heron, it's got a pretty good sized throat, so they swallow pretty good sized things.
Okay.
They nest in trees in colonies, so you'll get a large collection of herons in one area. And because of that, they can't all feed around there. So they have this small nesting territory, and then several miles maybe away, they have a feeding territory.
Okay.
And if they have young in the nest, they've got to eat a lot and come back and regurgitate. It doesn't pay for them to catch one little fish and bring it back to feed a young one, you know. So they've got to do that by bulking up and then regurgitating partly digested food for the young.
Those are the blue ones, but you see white ones that look just like them.
Yeah, those aren't herons. That's our great egret.
Okay.
It's a tall, not quite as tall as the great blue heron, but a tall bird. And I'll mention that it has a yellow bill, black legs, and black feet, because there's a snowy egret, which is a southern bird, but occasionally shows up here in Minnesota. And that bird shouldn't be confused with the great egret, but sometimes people get confused. But it has a black bill and yellow feet. So
remember that.
So if you can't get it by size, those colors should give you the clue on that. You know? Yeah.
Black bill, black feet, yellow bill, black feet.
And the egrets were heavily hunted in the late 19th century, early 20th century for their plumes, their breeding plumage, because it was all the fashion in those days to have, if you're a woman, to have a hat full of feathers. Yeah.
Okay.
So they were heavily hunted, and their protests grew up against that. And that kind of protest movement by women led to eventually the establishment of the Audubon Society.
Huh. How about ducks, obviously? And a lot of people don't think of ducks as living in trees, but some do.
Yes, yeah, some do. That, as a kid, when I first saw that kind of blew my mind. We don't have a lot of duck choices to talk about if we're talking about the Twin Cities.
Right.
There's mallards and wood ducks primarily, and there's plenty of both. So I'll talk about the wood duck, which is one that nests in the trees, and I'll say a little more in a moment.
Okay.
But wood ducks are about 3/4 the size of a mallard. The male has a very colorful head, multi-colors, and a white throat. Female's kind of a grayish brown, but her distinctive mark is a wide white ring around her eyes.
Okay.
They do nest in cavities in trees. When they're just 1 day old, the young, mom gets out on the ground or on the water if the nest box is set over water, and calls. And the message is basically, hey guys, you got to come on out.
Time to go.
And you can't fly, I know, but jump and hit the water or hit the ground, bounce, and we're going to take off for the lake. You know, it's that simple. Now here's another bird that wasn't endangered, I don't think we could say, but numbers were very low around 1900 because they had been hunted extensively and there weren't any limits. You know, if you wanted to shoot 20 wood ducks one day, you shot 20 wood ducks. You know.
Okay.
But from early 1900s until early 1930s, there was no hunting of wood ducks allowed. Plus people started making the wood duck nest boxes. And that led to a nice recovery. Today you can hunt wood ducks. There's a limit on how many you can hunt.
Right.
But their numbers are very good. They've recovered very nicely.
Okay. What other wetland ducks should we be watching for? Or wetland
Well,
birds?
yeah, wetland birds. A couple more might be like the Piedbilled Grebe.
Okay.
This is a chunky little bird, about 2/3 the size of a wood duck.
Okay, so we're getting smaller.
Yep, getting smaller. It's a bird that lives in the wetlands, rather shy, even though it's very common. Good diver. You don't see them fly very often. And also, they can lower themselves in water like a submarine. Yeah. So that maybe just the top of their head and their eyes are sticking out. That way they can watch for danger or watch you to see what you're doing, and you probably don't even notice them.
Okay.
You know. They're a brownish color, have a white bill with a dark ring around it during the breeding season. You know. And they do pretty well.
And they kick their young out really early. Not
Yeah.
even a day, like the wood ducks.
They jump out of the nest. There's on floating vegetation usually, and reeds. And they'll swim on their own. But if there's danger, they tend to crawl on mom or dad's back and even hide under a wing for protection. Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, we might mention a tern. We have about 3 kinds of terns common here. Well, 2. The common tern is not very common, unfortunately.
Okay.
But there's a blackturn. And terns in general have rather streamlined bodies, long pointed wings. And the blackturn has a black head, black body, gray wings, and gray tail. Most terns will dive right into the water to catch food. The blackturn, though, usually just picks up little minnows off the surface or, you know, shortly below the surface, and eats a lot of insects. And all these things it tends to pick up on the fly. And they nest in little colonies in the wetlands too. So there's, you can see there's a great variety of things in our wetlands. We haven't touched nearly all of them, but I would encourage people to get out there, particularly take children along. This is a good spot where you can see these bigger birds and they can enjoy seeing them too.
Wonderful, and if you have more questions, just come on out to Wargo Nature Center. I'm Martha Weaver with Anoka County Today, and Bob Holtz, our expert. Thanks for watching Birding with Bob.